So I started today to talk about customer-centric execution, and I love what Nate just shared. I think there's a lot of truth in that story and in that context. I want to poll the audience a little bit right now. So from 0 to 5, I want you to rate your company's maturity on being customer-centric. Not the contact center, the entire company. So again, 0 is not at all, 5 is amazing, and somewhere in between. So tell me real quick, how many, raise your hands, 0 to 5, about your company's customer centricity. I got 1, I got 2s, I got 4s, 2, 5, all right. Some 4s, some good numbers. The good news is nobody who's showing me 1 is showing me the middle finger. That is the good news. Because I've been in organizations that feel that way. It's not customer-centric. So we are all at different levels of maturity. Some of the companies that I've worked for and worked with that are the most customer-centric are actually getting in their way more than anything else. I worked for many years with an organization that financial institution. I'll just go ahead and say, I can say it. It's Charles Schwab. Anybody think Charles Schwab has good reputation? Client centricity? Absolutely. If you know Charles Schwab, they are absolutely a great organization from that perspective. The challenge was that customer centricity was everybody do what's right for the customer. They got more in their own way than some of the other companies I worked for that didn't pretend to say we're customer-centric. And so this was an opportunity of learning and understanding. So customer centricity honestly doesn't solve anything without structure. So that's what I want to share with you in closing today as we put our slides up. Again, there are ways in which, I got to switch it out. Sorry about that. There are ways that customer centricity will work, and there are ways that it won't. And I started talking about this a little earlier today. And the words that I love that Nate used was operating system. Organizations that I've worked with that have been successful in translating customer centricity to action and relevant action have a system behind it. And we've talked about the system all day today in different ways. So I want to take you through what that looks like here. So there are 6 camps, and I said earlier, this is not a quick jump up the mountain. This is like Everest. This is multi-year work. How many stories did we hear today about multi-year efforts to really mature the organization in the right way? It is not a quick fix. But what I understand in this is there are structures that can be done and need to be done. Now, I'm going to focus here on really understanding how to be customer-centric and how to execute at that level successfully across the organization. This isn't specific things for the contact center or specific AI tools or anything like that. This is really a structural transformation conceptually for the organization to endeavor. The first is you've got to prepare for the climb. This, in this context, is the base camp, Camp 1. So if you know anything about going up Everest, you go to the base camp and you spend quite a bit of time there because you start to get acclimated. The base camp for any initiative that you're trying to do to reach this level of kind of maturity and understanding and driving true customer-centric behavior across a complex organization especially, is you got to get acclimated. And it starts with leadership and culture, like I just talked about. If an organization has great leadership and culture, it does make everything beyond this much easier. You don't absolutely have to start with it, but it is the acclimation that most organizations have to go through. And this is not just fancy, pretty posters in the conference rooms with really great vision statements, right? This is more lived and real. And it is pushed down through the organization by leadership from an effective perspective. Trying to push it up business, much harder to do. Now, not the easiest thing in the world, but culture and leadership drive this acclimation to customer centricity. However, as I mentioned earlier, there's research that we've done. Really, only 25% of people understand the role they have and how it impacts the customer experience. So there's a gap there. Culture is not feeling, culture is not opinion. Culture is how action shows up during times of pressure. It's about how things get accomplished across the organization. And that's where silos often jump out, right? This is where sometimes those companies, that company, Charles Schwab, that I worked for, the reason why it got in its own way, everybody was trying to be what's right for the company or for the customer, but they were all doing it completely separate. So they were conflicting with each other. They were competing with each other. They weren't accomplishing things together. They were trying to solve everything, and that created so much redundant issues. Now, they've gotten a lot better, and I've been gone for a couple of years, so I know they're a lot better now, but it was a challenge. They were living and breathing by the old way of doing things. Like Nate said, let's use heroics. We're going to solve issues through heroics, not structure. This is the preparation you do before progress. The next is listening. You got to listen to the mountain. You got to understand what's going on. In this case, you got to listen to the customer. And we talked a lot about this. You've got to be able to understand what the customer's needs are. If you want to be customer-centric, you got to start pretty much with the customer from that perspective. Now, the truth here is, and we've talked about this today, a lot of organizations are still not mature in this space either. 70% of organizations primarily, if not only, use surveys to listen to the customer. Is anybody's response rate to surveys going up in recent years? No. Surveys are unfortunately kind of dying in that world. They're falling apart. But 70% of organizations, in the research we did, that's what they depend on. Only 25% actually look at digital activity from a customer experience perspective. They might look at digital activity specifically for the digital team to say, all right, how many people are using my widgets? They don't use it from a customer experience perspective. Only 15% use call and voice and text transcripts effectively for the purpose of customer experience. That's different than listening to calls and using the calls to coach an agent. It's looking at it holistically across all of that rich source data to understand not just what's being said and why people are calling. Heard examples earlier today that a lot of companies that had to migrate from that, weren't using it, weren't understanding it, but the emotion behind it. The technology today is so much more advanced to be able to really understand the emotion, the intent, and the impact of what's going on across all of your contributions of your customers talking with you. This is able to be tapped to at scale at a much greater level. There's also new technology that I'm really excited about because it's getting better. We talked about it earlier, like talking to customers again, actually having dialogue. And there's now voice AI interviewers that are being deployed where it's calling and talking to customers about their experience, but it's not a just check 1 through 5 kind of survey. It's a dialogue. How things going? What can we help with? Oh, you said that was a little bit difficult. Tell me a little bit more about that. That's a way to scale using AI, voice AI, across an organization to understand the experience. And it's a lot safer than doing a chatbot trying to give them an answer. You're getting data, you're getting information, you're gathering it. And again, you can get that emotion with it as well. I'm really excited about what that's happening these days. But you got to listen. You got to understand what's going on. Not just the intent, but also that emotion. Because we are still emotional beings as consumers and as customers. And if we're not tapping in and really understanding that, then it's our loss from that perspective. So we got to listen intelligently. Of course, it doesn't stop there because I have 6 camps. So the third camp is about the journey. And we heard earlier today that the focus on understanding the journey. The reason, if you're going to take this ride with me, is you got to map the experience. You got to have a route map of where you're going. That's the journey. More importantly, where's the customer going? The only way, you can listen all you want, but if you don't have the context of what the customer is trying to do when you get that feedback, you don't really understand how to leverage that. Now, we've been doing journey mapping for a very long time. So let me ask this. Who here already has active journey maps at your company? Several. Absolutely. Journey maps are not the end all, because too often those end up pretty pictures on a wall, right? Journey management is the active use of that and the real-time integration. And right now, only 34, just barely over a third of all organizations actually have real-time journey performance baked in. Understanding as people are going through this journey over and over again, how is it changing? Too often it's static, it's looked at maybe once a quarter or longer. The opportunity today, again, using AI, which is both the thing, as I said earlier, that is disrupting everything, but it's the thing that's making all of this possible as well. Looking at that in real time and understanding context at scale across that. And in many cases are being used for more advanced purposes even beyond that. You've got to understand the route. What's going on in that world so we get the context so that we can make the best improvements. Because too often if you just look at, we're going to try and improve something by X, you aren't even able to show the ROI of improvements on whether they fixed it unless you're looking at a specific journey and have that level of context about what's going on. The next is instruments. Net Promoter Score, CSAT, Customer Effort Score, trust, as I mentioned earlier today. These are all great metrics from a survey perspective. And we have a lot of other measures and metrics within the contact center and across the organization. Truly then bringing this together, you've got to integrate all of this key information. Not every metric you've got, but you've got to think of it from a customer health perspective. You've got to be able to leverage the top metrics from every part of your organization consistently together to understand the health. I mean, my own trips to the doctor. I got glucose, I got cholesterol, we have all of these different health metrics that all together represent how we are as humans. The same is true for our customers. Realizing that and using that at scale to understand, because when we think about, again, going back to getting customer centricity to be working effectively across silos, this is one of the key areas you're doing it. You bring in all of that listening that you've done prior. You have an understanding of the journey context that the customer's experience, and now you're looking at the metrics that across the organization. That's how you start to break down those silos. Because even better at this point, you can start to show when this metric goes up or down, it's usually influenced by or influences these other metrics for other groups. Nothing brings a group, different departments in an organization together more than realizing how much they actually do relate to each other and impact each other on the work done. And you take that emotion out of it because you're looking at metrics, you're looking at the content together and seeing how these levers pull and change. And showing, again, in the context of the route, where those opportunities to improve. Next is you build an engine. And again, this is really where the power starts to come in today's day and age. And many of the groups that I know that talked earlier that are at that higher and highest level of maturity, this is what they've done. They're bringing together the operating system. They're using the data, like Asif and I talked about, those databases in real time. We're translating that information and understanding truly those tie-ins. Health dashboards are one thing to understand and see how things are moving. This is real-time improvements on that same function. 37%, though, only say that they have a single customer view, that they've brought all those pieces together in the research that we did. But this is the future. This is the expectation that has, because guess what? Now the expectation is growing to say, hey, you should know I'm about to go down an unhappy resolution path and get in front of it and fix it before it even happens, right? That's the expectation that's becoming to be real. Hey, if you know that, hundreds, if not thousands of other customers, when they do X, Y, and Z, they have a bad experience, stop at X, don't get to Y, and fix it. That's the expectation, honestly, in many cases, from a maturity standpoint, we should expect of ourselves as we move into this next age. Because again, this technology is now making it real. And it's a platform that even better than the customer health dashboard, it brings everybody in real time. And it, in that context, truly changes the end behavior of the organization on behalf of the customer from that perspective. This is Camp 5. Camp 6 is repeatable execution. When we hit Camp 6, you've got to be able, you're almost at the summit. The summit, as we're going to talk about, is reaching that customer-centric execution at scale and excellence across the organization. But this is your ropes team. Again, going back to the analogy, when you hit the top level of a big climb like Everest or something like that, you're not just tied to each other on the way up. You're tied to the mountain because the risk is much higher. This goes back to another thing Nate just talked about. I'm going to send him a gift card because he teed this up perfectly. It's that governance. It's understanding the opportunity to tie this together from a repeatable perspective. Because what happens when something shifts? At the very beginning, we talked about it. The avalanche occurs, and it's triggered by the weak layers are then exemplified by that change and that disruption. The only way to hold during this is having this level of governance, having this opportunity. And when we think about the maturity, I said at the very beginning, 56.7 on a maturity index is where we are right now. 87% of the variance of maturity is determined by strategy, monitoring, and culture. And so from that perspective, the monitoring, obviously the strategy being how are we going to get to this point, and then the culture being that baseline. So this is where these pieces have to come together for the next generation organization that's prepared for this future, really the future that is now. Now, again, I go back to this is not easy work. This is long-term work. And a lot of organizations are doing that. It goes back to some of the dialogue we've had today about do I build it, do I buy it? Because there's a lot of moving parts that go into this kind of strategy. But it's also the opportunity we have. And it's getting easier to accomplish as well. Most of the time, these were mainly being built out by really, really large enterprise organizations that can throw a lot of money at the challenge. It's not necessarily that way anymore. I'm consulting with companies where we're taking this opportunity in pieces and we're doing that multi-year roadmap to make this change real for them. Here's the other problem. You reach the summit once, you're not over. Talked a little earlier that most of the time when you go hiking like that, you're going up and down between the different camps because you get acclimated, you come back down, you go back up again. You're always moving from camp to camp, making improvements. Because again, any one of these camps can provide any number of changes that need to happen in the organization. So you take it piece by piece. The reality is you're building the muscle memory for your organization to stay at that level of maturity and keep up with by next year, once a month changes to how things are done as we're looking at this. So it's resetting and making sure that you're not focused on having to reset or change. Has anybody ever experienced a change in direction from senior leadership because something externally shifted in the organization? I think we all have. That's very, yeah, absolutely. It happens. Part of this, going back to the operating system, is you take out just that knee-jerk reaction to this when you build a mature organization. Now, I'm a little bit passionate about this, as you can tell. And we have a lot of opportunity, but we have to take this to do this together in both community and in our own organizations to drive this forward. But I'm excited about the future of what it looks like. And I do think the contact centers absolutely have the opportunity to take the lead here because you know the customer better than anyone else. So if we want to be customer-centric, you're the starting point for this. But it's being able to translate this kind of message to the rest of the organization, coming to events like this and going back to the leadership with readouts that say, here's how this can work. Now, one way I'd like to offer this is, if you scan the QR code, I talked about the research, right? I got a full report, downloadable report that you can access with all of this information around the next gen of the organization. So if it helps you take and translate this message to your leaders, I hope this will help. It's a great opportunity to show them this is what most organizations are. Because I think a lot of companies that get a little worried, they're saying, oh, we're too immature. And so they get scared to start. The reality is, if we're only collectively at like a 56 index, we've all got a lot of room to go. And so it gives us that opportunity to have the right dialogue. Because this ebook is about the full route map. It gives you the expanded conditions report if you think about how things are happening today across the CX maturity. Got some self-checks in there and connects with me as well. So I appreciate you spending some time with me today. One other way that we can connect, I did bring about a dozen copies of my new book, so I'd love to give you guys a signed copy of my book. It really addresses how to make most out of our organization and our alignment across these factors. So I've got some of these if you want to come see me as we break today. But on that, we are at the close of today's session. And did you like today? Did you get a lot out of today? All right. We have got so much more tomorrow. So make sure you're ready bright and early tomorrow. We've got a whole other day ready to go and more great speakers. And I am looking forward to seeing you on day 2. But for now, we have reception right across the hall with some drinks to consume. And I hope you enjoy this evening. And I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow morning.